some reason, can you hear me now? Okay. I'm sorry about that. My Rodecaster Pro, my channel mixer for my microphone, for some reason, I had it on mute, but then when I unmuted it, it wasn't showing up on my streaming software, and I had to restart the whole thing, and it didn't even want to start up again. I just upgraded my Mac to the new operating system, so I don't know if that has anything to do with it. I'm sorry. I actually, for all of you that couldn't hear, and it's going to be silent. I'll probably cut out the first part of this, but let's welcome Lisa, Stephanie Beckman is here, Alberto Melendez, Nature Lover, Zen Maiden One, welcome. And Matthew Martoli and Laura Jobs. Welcome to the stream. Now, hopefully you can hear me. I see that I am coming out. I should keep my AirPods Pro handy just in case. That's what I had done. I went up and got my AirPods Pro, and then when my AirPods Pro connected, my mixer connected. I apologize, everybody. Today we're just going to have a normal Ask Me Anything live. I don't have any subjects to go over in particular. Any questions that you may have about any of my videos, the recent videos that I did, I'm letting you know that, Apple upgrades. So a lot of times, a lot of stuff. So actually, there's a big controversy over the iPhone 15 now that it's supposedly not working. And aloha, Nature Lover. How's it going? Like I said, I'm going to just Ask Me Anything about Mexico. A little bit about where my plans are for the next couple of weeks. I have to go to San Miguel de Allende in a couple of weeks, about 2 or 3 weeks, and I'm going to be there to sell my house. It's already been listed, but as some of you may know or may not know, my house my residence is up for sale. And so we're going to go over there. We still have stuff in there. We're selling it furnished, but we still have stuff in there that we're going to have to either bring back or send back or sell. So I'm going to be in San Miguel de Allende. I plan on doing a bunch of videos, but I'm going to do less content videos. I have a couple of content videos on different technical issues here in Mexico, some updates on the different things like the Corp, the RFC, stuff that might affect you. Videos that I'm kind of doing over, but just an update, just to let you know what's going on, just like I did with the tip. My last tip video was a long time ago, so not much has changed, but I figured I'd update a lot of my previous content to be more recent. Also, let's go come on with the first question. If I begin my permanent residency in 2023, if I do my canje in 2024, will I have to buy the 2023 or 2020? Well, I think you meant 2024 requirements. Cindy, actually, the requirements are going to be when you go to the consulate. What you have to abide by, if you begin you meant 2024. Let me keep these, you know what? I have a habit of bringing these up and then just putting them back down. If you have your appointment at the consulate in 2023, you're going to have to meet the 2023 requirements. And then they'll put the foil visa. But remember, you have 180 days to get there. So let's say you do it, you have 180 days. So now that it's October, it's a good chance that you could go in January or February. Or let me see, January, 6 months from now, or 180 days from now. So there is a good chance you have to go. Now, you have already met the financial requirements. You're going to have a visa foil. You're going to go. And one thing to note that they're still going to probably ask you for financials in immigration, but that doesn't really mean much. But here's a thing to note about immigration. They're using the UMA formula, and the consulate uses the minimum wage to figure stuff out. Actually, INM, there's been, I should do a video about this, but the immigration system's kind of broken because the requirements for immigration when you get to Mexico are less than, but you got to get by the consulate. So even though like Mexico, the immigration says it's so much, and I don't know what it is right now with immigration, I'd have to figure it out with the UMA formula, but it's a substantial amount less. And then if you went to the immigration officers, they're going to tell you, oh, this is only going to, it's only going to be 1,600 or 1,800, 1,900 a month. And then you're going to have, at the same time, the consulate telling you that it's 2,700 or 3,200. So once you get your Congen visa in 2023, those are the requirements you have to meet. It's getting past the consulate that's the big thing. Once you get past the consulate, you're pretty much smooth sailing. You pretty much already, I mean, the consulate is the one that you need to get past. That's the problem that everybody has right now. And that's even the problem that, like I've even said in the past, they can even deny you if they want to, believe it or not. Even if you meet the requirements, it doesn't happen very often. DC was very famous for that. And I have had people make comments that they got denied even though they qualified. But I kind of have a feeling they got into an argument or some type of thing happened. And I don't see the reason why they would do that. And Zen Maiden, actually tell us why you left San Miguel for Monterrey. Sorry if you told this in a prior video. I recall you had that place built for you. Yes, actually, Zen Maiden, I don't mind saying the story again, why we moved to Monterrey. We love San Miguel de Allende. Actually, we're crying that we have to sell our house in San Miguel. And we kind of had some plans to keep the house, but just upkeeping both houses and everything else, it can get expensive. So we decided that we were going to go ahead and sell. But here's one of the main reasons why I moved to San Miguel. If a lot of you don't know, if you look back in some of my prior videos, when I first moved here to Mexico, I was diagnosed with head and neck cancer. And I was actually treated here in Monterrey. My oncologist is here in Monterrey. I also have some heart issues that I have it's not serious right now, but it could be serious, and my surgeon is here if I need to take care of the heart issues. And we also found in San Miguel, Querétaro has very good private health care because we usually use private health care here. And Querétaro has very good private health care, but Monterrey and Guadalajara and Mexico City are the best for healthcare. So we decided, you know what, we need to come to Monterrey because we were making a lot of trips back and forth. Another thing that's important to note is that my wife's from Mexico. She's originally from Monterrey. My in-laws are still alive, and they're getting on in age, and we want to spend their last years, hopefully many more years, but we want to spend, we don't want to spend it all away. And not only that, but we were coming and visiting a lot. Actually, we were visiting a lot to Monterrey before I even retired to see my in-laws. So this gives us a chance to be close to family. So really, that's the only reason why we moved from San Miguel. We love San Miguel. I know everybody looks at me like, wait, San Miguel de Monterrey. It didn't have anything to do with it being a big city or anything else. It doesn't have anything to do with that. It's purely health issues, making sure that I'm close to my doctors, and having to come back for, at one point, every 6 months. It's an 8-hour drive, 9-hour drive. Well, By the time you stop, we have two little ones, two baby fur babies. And by the time we would stop for restroom breaks, everything else, it was 9 hours or 10-hour drive, and depending on traffic. So we were doing that every 6 months, and it was getting very tiring. So that's why we moved to Monterrey. And then here's Trade with Cade. When you get your temp residency in Baja Sur, I heard you can bring a household goods in one time without having to pay. How does that work? Are you given a permit of some kind? Actually, Trade with Cade, let me explain to you that you do get a one-time, when you move, you do get a one-time import of all your household goods into Mexico, duty-free. And that's what they call a maneja de casa. And it's what you have to actually, the maneja de casa is kind of like a permit. You have to go to the consulate. It's a very detailed, what they require is an inventory of all of your stuff that you're going to bring. And they want a very detailed inventory, especially on electronics. You have to have all the serial numbers. I have my sister-in-law tried to do a menaje de casa. Actually, this is not just for residencies. For example, residents, for example, it can be for Mexican citizens. Let's say you're a permanent resident or you're a dual citizen and you're moving back to Mexico. They give you a one-time menaje de casa. And basically, it's kind of a, I'm moving to Mexico. I get a one-time chance to bring all my stuff in. What I will note is what we did was we hired a mover that did that process for us, kind of, sort of, with customs. We actually ended up having to pay a little bit extra. But if you want to do it yourself, you have to do it through the consulate. And there's a whole process. You make an appointment. You take your inventory, and it's kind of one of those things that's pretty, some people have had very good luck and not had a problem, and some people say it's a nightmare. Actually, my sister-in-law took her, and my sister-in-law is very, she works with a major corporation, and she's very, very detailed-oriented, and she took a very detail-oriented, what do you call it, list, and she's a Mexican citizen, even to top it off, and they gave her the come back with a more detailed list, even more details than what you got there. What I would do is get, and usually what our mover told us is if we wanted to do the menaje de casa, he wouldn't charge a certain amount, and if he did the menaje de casa, then he would charge a certain amount. But it's a process, and you just get a special certificate, I guess you might say, when you go across and take your stuff, or that you send with your stuff. But that's how you do that. You can bring your household goods. Here's another thing that I will say. We bought our house empty, and it looked a lot bigger than what we thought as far as the living spaces. When you have a house that's very empty, and we had some furniture that was very large, we ended up bringing all our furniture, and to be honest with you, we ended up getting rid of it. And actually, all the furniture in the house, if you go and look at the listing on our house, all of that stuff's custom made. We should have never even brought half the stuff that we brought. I always tell people, just wait till you get to Mexico, and you can have custom made furniture. But it's probably better for you there to do that. And we ended up having to give away or sell most of our furniture. The good thing, though, that we did bring was we had beds. Like, for example, beds are hard to find here, good ones. Or if you want to buy some, we had Tempur-Pedic mattresses, and if you want to buy Tempur-Pedic here, it's like super expensive. So we had some Tempur-Pedic mattresses. So bedding is good. Beds are good to bring in. But your normal furniture, I wouldn't worry, I wouldn't bring that in, to be honest with you. We made a big, that was one of our big mistakes when we came. We found that, and actually we custom made our furniture for half of what we would have even paid at Rooms to Go. to be honest with you. And it's beautiful furniture. Actually, our dining room table is made out of vigas from an old church with wood that's over 100 years old. Flying SGP, we're coming down in January for our now annual 2-month visit to our family and work our property in Nayarit. We are looking to bring our 2015 GMC 2500 truck and trailer. Any issue with weight of both? I believe, darn it, I forgot how many. Maybe you could help me, Brett. Yeah, I think it's 25 metric tons that you can, the trailer, the weight as far as the vehicle. The trailer is a different process that you have to go through with customs. You can tow a trailer. Just make sure you have all the paperwork on the trailer, the registration to the trailer, and that trailer will go along with your tip. But that's, I do know it's a totally different process because a lot of people bring in motorcycles and jet skis and that type of stuff. So I think, if I'm not sure, it's 25 metric tons. I can look it up. But there is a weight limit on it. And let me just look up the weight limit real quick. Let me see, vehicles, temporary import permit. But actually, 25 metric tons is pretty big. I mean, you're looking at something the size of an RV. So depending on the size of your trailer, weight limit is 3.5, not 25. I'm sorry, it's 3.5 metric tons, which is about 7,716 pounds. And they do have scales at most of the ports. So that's where you may have a weight limit. That's where you, and trailers and all of that stuff, that goes separate with your tip, but it's tied to your vehicle. I've never done one like that, and I've never done an RV, so I'm not too familiar with. Actually, Brett, you've got a good. Actually, he was responding to Trade with K. In addition to what I tell you, you should Google Manaje de Casa. The other thing I also advised you to do, Trade with Kate, is also check with the consulate that you would actually do it with, because some of the consulates are different. Some of the consulates are different as far as the requirements are. The consulate that my sister-in-law went to was very, very strict. Other consulates are, thank you for, and I'm not kidding you, I've heard this before. It's not a secret, but they'll look at your inventory and go, okay, here's your certificate. And I even had an issue with customs not too long ago, and I never did a video on this, but I had all my YouTube equipment, right? And I had to go stay in McAllen, Texas for a period of about 3 months. And I said, well, if I take all this equipment, this is thousands of dollars worth of computer equipment, when I come back in, I'm going to have an issue because they're going to say, hey, you can't bring this in or you got to pay duties. So what I did was I went with customs and I said, what do I do? Because this stuff's already in Mexico. I'm taking it out of Mexico and I'm bringing it back in. And I got a couple of different answers, but long story short, from one of the supervisors, he said, no, you have to fill out a form. It's a special form that you fill out when you take anything out of value out of Mexico. It's a customs form. He had me fill it out and an inventory of all the stuff I took out. And he said, when you come back in, you show the customs officials this form so then you don't have to pay duty. and they certified that you took it out. Well, I had an inventory. I'm not going to go into how much stuff I had, but I had a big, large inventory. I actually had prepared an inventory, and they took me to the side and they were saying, okay, fill out this form. And they said, okay, we're going to look at all your stuff. And so I said, okay. So I started taking, okay, this is the microphone. This is my mixer. And the next thing you know, he just looked down and he said, okay, yeah. And just checked it all off. So it's hit and miss. And that happens at the consulate too with the menaje de casa. It also happens with customs. Sometimes they'll look at, they'll look at your menaje de casa and they'll look and say, okay, where's this item? Where's that item? And be very, very, when they're inspecting you. Other times, they don't even, okay, thank you. And actually, when I showed them the list, I brought all the stuff back. And when I came back, I was like, here's my, and we actually got the red light. So we had to stop. And of course, you can imagine my back was filled with nothing but electronics. And I said, oh, here's my list. Do you want to go over the inventory? And they were like, no, it's okay. Keep going. So it just depends who you get. Let me see here. Zima was telling me that it's good that I'm close to my physicians. That's one of the reasons why we're here. Also close to family. Flying SGP. Also, my wife is a Mexican citizen. I will be starting my residency citizenship journey. Perfect. Oh, the only thing, flying SGP, I don't know if you're going to do it in Mexico, because the thing is, you're married to a Mexican citizen, so you can do it there in Mexico. You don't have to go through the consulate. I did it through the consulate. Well, it's a long story because I was going to ask for temporary. We really didn't know how to do it. We were kind of just looking stuff up on the internet. I kind of went blind, and we went. And I went with all my financials. I qualified for permanent because I was already retired. I met the financial solvency requirement. And then I went and took all my stuff, and I started talking to the consulate officer, and then she was talking to me, and she said, okay, well, why don't you want permanent? And I'm like, I want to bring a vehicle. And she goes, but permanent's better. And I'm like, I want to bring a vehicle. I want temporary. And then she's going, okay. So she starts looking over my paperwork, and she's like, and your wife, is she coming too? Because my wife was out waiting. And well, my wife's Mexican citizen. Oh, she's a Mexican citizen? Why didn't you tell me? And I'm like, because I didn't know. And then she says, okay, well, do me a favor. Is your wife outside? And I say, yeah. Does she have her INA with her? Yeah. And she goes, okay, well, I'm just going to approve you on the fact that you're married to a Mexican citizen. That way I don't have to review any of your paperwork. And I'm like, okay. So my wife came in. They took a copy of her INA. Now, I had a marriage certificate myself already because like I was prepared with like all sorts of paperwork. And JC says, oh, and do you have a marriage certificate? If not, don't worry, but show it to me. And I showed her the marriage certificate. It wasn't apostolized. It wasn't anything. It was just an official one from the county. Actually, her name, in the United States, you don't use the second last name. And sometimes they're very, very picky about the second last name. But they just looked at it. I believe on the marriage certificate, it was just her father's last name on the marriage certificate, like it was officially in the United States. They just accepted that. But what you need to be careful with flying SGP is that everything matches. Because if you do it in Mexico, what happens is they're going to say, and then also what we did this on purpose, but we also registered our marriage in Mexico. That way we wouldn't have any issues at immigration. So when I took all my immigration paperwork, we already were married in Mexico with all the right names matching. That might be what you have to do, but just make sure that your marriage certificate is apostolized. What I always tell people is, especially with Mexican, being married to a Mexican citizen, it's an easy process. You automatically qualify. You don't have to meet the financial solvency requirements. And as a matter of fact, that's what a lot of YouTubers will tell you, that, oh, that's one way. If you're married to a Mexican citizen, you don't need to meet financial solvency. Well, but what they don't tell you is that even though it's a simple process, you can get tied up. Oh, and you don't even have to go to the consulate. You just go straight to INM and they're going to give it to you. No, they're not going to give it to you. They're going to require proof of your marriage. Then, well, for example, let's say, I don't know, your maiden name in the United States or your passport has your name, but it doesn't have let's say your wife, because here in Mexico, you use both your father's last name and your mother's last name. So when you were born, for example, my last name would be Baca Diaz, my last name here in Mexico. But I'm not Baca Diaz in the United States, and I don't have a birth certificate that says Baca Diaz. But if I was born here in Mexico, my last name would be Baca Diaz, Diaz. Well, a lot of people, when they move to the United States, well, I just become Baca. So let's say my passport says Ernest Baca, my U.S. passport or whatever. Let's say I'm naturalized citizen and I naturalize, I don't use my last name, and I use I do all my stuff with my last name of Baca. I get married as Baca. I don't get married as Baca Diaz. And then when I go and my wife, let's say my wife was applying, and we show the marriage certificate that Ernest Baca is married to this person, they're going to say, yeah, but Ernest Baca is really Ernest Baca Diaz. This is his Mexican passport. He's Ernest Baca Diaz. Yeah, but this is not the same person. The person in the marriage certificate is Ernest Baca, not Ernest Baca Diaz. I'm not kidding you. This is how serious they are. They're very serious about the exact matching names, and they're very serious about matching signatures. So if your signature has changed, they're going to give you a hard time. If your signature is not the same as it was, maybe let's say your Mexican passport, your wife signed it a certain way and she just changed the way she signs paperwork. She has to sign her paperwork. Let me give you an example. My wife, her INE, her last name is very long. Not real long, but very long. It's long to be putting on certain signature line. So when she signed her INE with the first two parts of her name on the top, and then she continued on the bottom. Now, every official document she signs, she can't sign straight her name on the line. She has to sign exactly the way it is on her INE. So all the signatures on all of the legal documents that we have here in Mexico are her first part of her name and then her last part of her name underneath. So that's one thing. And what I always do is tell you, get a facilitator, because what you can do is they can tell you ahead of time, this INM office wants your marriage certificate of apostolate. This INM office is really picky or not picky. They can tell you. They do processes all the time. They handle it all the time for you. And it's worth the extra money. So hopefully everything goes through. That's the only warnings that I have. It's easy if you have everything together in the right order. So Brett Jones, you can bring $500 worth of stuff down when you fly. I brought most of my stuff that way. Yes, it's $500 when you fly, but it's $300 on a land border. So if you're coming through a land border, it's $300. Now, I believe it's in November, that amount goes up. I believe it goes up to $500 or $600. But that's in November through the Christmas season, because a lot of people go back and forth on the land border. But if you're flying in, and here's the other thing too, is if you have a partner, if you're flying in with your wife or your spouse, you can aggregate the $500. So I'll give you an example. One of my friends that lives in San Miguel de Allende, starting a studio there, a really good friend of mine, he had a piece of equipment that he was bringing in for his studio, and he was like, hey, I got this piece of equipment. It's a recording equipment. It's a really expensive piece of equipment. I said, well, how much is it worth? And he says, it's like $800. And I said, do you have a receipt for it? He goes, yeah, I have a receipt. I just bought it. And I said, okay, well, are you traveling with your wife? He said, yeah, I'm traveling with my wife. I said, okay, look, here's the deal, because he had it in a, those Pelican cases. I said, they're going to put it through the x-ray machine. They're going to see it's electronics, and they're going to pull you over, whether you get the red light or the green light. And just have the $800 and say, here, I'm $800. There's my wife, and we have $1,000. So therefore I make the amount. And so he did that, and they let him through. I mean, as a matter of fact, they even just said, oh, do you have here's a receipt. Oh yeah. Okay. Just go through. So, Brett Jones, I don't drive. That's it. Well, actually, I found out how many metric tons, but Sedona, I have a question about Monterrey Airport. I need to make a connection there flying from U.S. to Morelia. How big, complicated is it? Are there clear signs to get to the domestic flights? It depends. If you booked your whole reservation, it's all going to be in one area of the airport. The airport in Monterrey is not really super big. You're not going to get lost. It's not like Mexico City. Monterrey is a big city, but they have your terminals are kind of together. The only place that is separated is where you go from Terminal A to Terminal C, and it's a totally separate building, is Viva Aerobus, which Viva Aerobus runs out of a different terminal. So you may have some issues if you have to change to a local carrier. But if you're coming in like American Airlines, flying into Monterrey, switching on American Airlines, or switching to another like Volaris or whatever down to Morelia, then you shouldn't have an issue. The airport's not hard to navigate there in Monterrey. You're going to just have to check in with immigration, of course, because that'll be your entry into Mexico. And just make sure you'll probably have to get your luggage, probably have to go through customs, exit, and then re-enter. But it's not going to be, it's not a, unless you have to go to Terminal C, which is usually Viva Aerobus. And actually, Viva Aerobus, this last time we went to Cancun, but Viva Aerobus was actually going out of Terminal A. But you'll end up back out where you check in, and where you check in, all the flights check in at the same place. You'll just have to, if you have your transfer tickets already, that's fine, or your boarding pass, you just go back through security with your luggage. Or sometimes I've never had to go from U.S. Monterrey to another destination. I've always flown out of Monterrey, but some airports, I know in the United States, your luggage gets checked all the way. And when you go through customs, there's a little place where you leave your luggage to keep going. I don't know if that's the way it is in Monterrey or not. But hopefully that answers your question. It's not a big airport. You're not going to get lost. And trade with exactly the kind of items I want to bring, Brett. No furniture, kitchen things, linens, small electronics. You shouldn't have a problem. Also, to note, trade with Kate. Actually, Brett kind of answered you there too. One thing that you are allowed, for example, on your electronics, just remember the $500 is all your other stuff. Like, for example, what I mean by all your stuff, like, for example, your kitchen mixers and all of that stuff. But you are allowed like one laptop, your iPad, your telephone, all of those things. So like if you're bringing in a laptop or some people have brought in computers by saying this is my computer, but normally it's a laptop. Now, here's the thing. If it's two laptops, then they might say, okay, well, what's the value? So what I would do is if you're going to bring in a laptop, that doesn't go towards your $500. The $500 is all your other personal stuff. Linens, stuff like that, they're not going to really worry about. They're going to be worried about, like, if you're bringing in, like what Brett Jones said, a kitchen mixer. He brought in a KitchenAid mixer, a cast iron skillet, stuff like that. Actually, sometimes too, customs will actually say, hey, it's for personal use. Like, for example, a skillet, linens, the sheets and stuff like that. Now, what I wouldn't do is Maybe I would just take the sheets out of they're brand new, I would take them out of the packaging and pack them in your suitcase. They're your sheets. So a lot of, remember the $500 is going to be electronic type of stuff, kitchen appliances, stuff like that. That's what's going to count towards your $500. A TV. If you're bringing in a TV, if you can even check it in on the airplane. Some places I've seen it happen. From South America, I've seen people buy TVs and actually check it into the box into the luggage, but those are the things that are going to count towards your $500. Now, like I said, you can bring in a laptop, your phone, a tablet. Those are not towards your $500 unless there's a second tablet or a third tablet or a second computer or a third computer. Then you will be charged duty. Oh, actually, perfect. Flying SGP. If you got married in Nayarit, just get your marriage certificate. Make sure you have your your passports, all of that stuff. You should be good to go. Actually, that's the way we did it. So perfect. And you should have a Mexican, go to I think it's a notario, where you have your marriage recorded and actually get a copy of, because here's the thing we discovered, I didn't know this, but we have had to get our marriage certificate several times, the official notarized marriage certificate. And they told us that was only good for like 1 year or 2 years. So you need to make sure that you go to the notario where you have your marriage registered and just get a recent copy when you go to INM, because they might send you. No, those are the little things they'll send you back for. Oh, you have your original marriage certificate from 10 years ago or 20 years ago. Oh, no, you know what? You need to go get an official copy from last week. Oh, so you have to run from INM, and come back the next day for another appointment or whatever, or make another appointment. Just depending so just have all that paperwork together. That's the only thing that I warn against people, because I'll tell you what, we went through it. That's why I warn people against it. Not because, oh my God, INM's this or INM's that. No, we went through that. I made about 5 or 6 trips to the INM office because every single time we were missing some document. Actually, matter of fact, they said, you need to go get this document. And we were like, okay, where do we get it? Because we don't even know where. At the pavilion. And we were like, okay, where's the pavilion? And my wife's from Monterrey. At the pavilion. And we're like, oh, but we don't know. Like, is there an address? Well, everybody knows where the pavilion is. And we're looking at them like, okay, but what do we do? And so we made a lot of trips back and forth. And that's why I always say, get a facilitator. Actually, we got a facilitator when I renewed my temporary residency. And we didn't know any better. I could have gotten it for 2 years. I had to actually renew it for another year because I got the first year, because we did it on our own. And then I said, I'll just convert to permanent residency, because I didn't take a car. We didn't bring a car like we planned, and I should have gotten permanent to begin with. And then they said, you've only had it for a year. You have to renew it for a year because you have to be married 2 years as a temporary, when I could have gone straight to permanent. But and that's the other thing, flying SGP, if they tell you that you can only get temporary to start, and you have to get the 2 years right up front, because usually they try to give you 1 year. You can get the 2 years being married to a Mexican citizen, and after the 2 years you can convert to permanent. And sometimes they'll just go straight to permanent. Laura, we'll be entering Mexico in about a month. We are temporary residents, and our first year temporary residence will expire about 45 days after we enter. We will get a tip for 45 days, I assume. Yes, Laura. I think I'm not sure who had asked this question. I think maybe you were the one that would ask it. I haven't had a chance to someone asked the question about the tip, and I want to say it was Laura and one that you'll get it for the 45 days. You can get it for here's the thing about a tip. They might issue it for 180 days, But usually what they will do is they will give it to you for the duration of whatever it'll expire in the 45 days of the temporary residency. And then I think whoever it was that asked the question was like, well, what the last time we entered, we came in for 180 days. They gave us we did it with an FMM, and I'm like, no, don't do it. That's what I'm about to answer on that question. I just haven't had a chance. Don't come in on FMM for any reason, because you'll check in as a tourist. Don't use your U.S. passport. You come in on your residency card, and you will have to show your passport with your residency card. You were the one that asked. You will have to come in on your residency card. You don't fill out the FMM anymore. Actually, you used to have to when you exit, and then you come back in, it was the opposite. You give the top part of the form instead of the bottom part. You keep the top part instead of the bottom part, and then you return the top part. But now everything's electronic. You just check in with your residency card. But and at the land borders, a lot of we had somebody that I just was in contact with that said that when they wanted to check out, the immigration agent was looking at them like, why? Like, I don't need to stamp your passport. The land borders are a little bit different, but let me finish up with yours, Laura. Since when your temporary residency expired, I've heard that most people don't end up getting their deposit back, even though they extend their tip. Do you have much information on that? Here's the thing, Laura. I've heard a lot about people not getting their deposit back. Here's the problem that a lot of issues that people have with their deposit. One thing you need to understand is that your tip is done through Banjército. It's done through customs, but it's also done it's kind of weird. The tip, your deposit is left with Banjército. What we normally And what people do is they lose their deposit when they get the tip extended. And what probably happens most of the time, and what I've seen happen a lot, especially on canje processes, when you come in on canje, they give you a 30-day tip, right? Because you have 30 days to come in. And what ends up happening is you don't cancel that tip before the due date. So for example, you come in, you're here for your 30 days, you go through your immigration process, the immigration process goes back. And you're kind of caught in a kind of weird situation because your tip expires, but then at the same time, you're waiting for your new card. And then if you go back to get a new one, what happens is if you pass that expiration date, the computer automatically says, there goes your $400. And that's why one of the things that I said in the tip is even if you're a temporary resident, let's say you're going back home, turn in your tip. And then even though you have it for 4 years, what if you get in a car accident? What if your car is totaled and then you go buy a new car? Then you come back and you say, I want a new tip. And you can only hold one tip at a time. So they're going to say, well, wait a second, but you have this car that you own that never left Mexico. Well, no, but I left Mexico. I took it, but I got in a car accident. They're going to say, well, it never left Mexico because you didn't turn in your tip. So it can be very, very, very difficult to cancel your tip and to get a new tip and everything else. What I would do, Laura, and it also depends where you're at. The problem too is, for example, certain customs offices have a Banjército right there. You go, you cancel your tip, but certain areas are not as touristic or they don't have the facilities. So even though they say they canceled your tip, they didn't cancel your tip and they just kind of, thank you very much. But you need to, and you need to make sure that you're still legally there. It's kind of a weird thing. What I would do, and this is what I believe you can apply 30 days ahead of time, and make sure that when you go to the customs office, tell them that, hey, I want my deposit back. I need to extend the tip. Or if you can get your residency taken care of, for example, let's say your residency ends in January 15th. Let's say you get there beforehand, 30 days before or 45 days before, like you said, you get an appointment and you take care of your residency on January 1st. You can go and cancel your tip that expires on January 15th, get your deposit back, and then get a new tip. That's your best case scenario. That way you get your deposit back. The problem that people have with extending it, like saying, I'm here for my thing, I need to extend it for another 3 weeks because I'm here for my immigration process or whatever. They let you extend it with the proof of your immigration papers and that type of stuff. And you do risk losing the tip. Your best bet is making sure that you take care of your residency before your residency expires. But I do realize that the other thing that you might have an issue with is that some immigration offices, you can't, let's say your residency expires in 30 days, but the next appointment is in 2 months. As long as you make an appointment, you're good. You just have to stay in the country, and you're not illegally. You just show them, hey, I have an appointment, and they can't throw you out, or they can't deny you residency because it's their fault that they don't have any appointments. And here's the other issue you have is, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, with me, I can just tell you from me, my own personal experience, when I renewed both times, I think it was 30 days before is the maximum that before that expires that you can actually, 30 days before the tip expires, not the tip, the 30 days before your residency expires, you can actually apply for renewal. I don't think you can go further than 30 days. Like, you can't come in 40 days, 5 days. But that was in Monterrey. I don't know if it's in other areas. Yeah, applying it, yes, based on what others experience, so we're careful about making sure all the names are, and your names are going to match. If you got married especially if you got married in Mexico, her full name's going to be on the marriage certificate, exactly like it's on the, and your name's going to be exactly like it was on your U.S. passport, because that's what they're going to take. So you're going to be good flying SGP. You're going to be good. I missed your conversation about the payment. What were we talking about? What was the $500? The $500, if I'm not mistaken, what she's talking about is a deposit for your tip. Oh, no, the $500, because I'm sorry. There's the $500 that we're talking about, Lisa. I'm sorry, I got confused. The $500 is what you can bring in to Mexico. I mean, this is when you come into Mexico, and regardless of whether you're a tourist or you're a resident, okay? It doesn't matter. You are allowed to bring up, if you are flying in, now you got to remember, if you're flying in, you have a $500 per person allowance to bring in of items duty free. There's also a certain amount of cigars and cigarettes you can bring in. I don't know the exact amount, but that's what you have if you're flying in. If you're crossing a U.S. border, it's $300 worth of goods. Now, what I was mentioning is you're also allowed to bring in one personal computer, one personal laptop. Personal laptop, not personal computer. Well, personal computer, but it's a laptop, and one iPad, your telephone. So they don't count that towards the $500. They're not going to go look and say, oh, your telephone's worth $2,000. You need to pay duties on it. Now, if you had a second or third telephone, then they might say, you know what, you're bringing that in to sell it. Then therefore we deem that. Actually, believe it or not, I believe Jordan from Tangerine Travels, he did that, actually did a video where he went back home and he bought a computer, and somebody told him that he only had to pay duties on his used computer, that on a new computer he didn't have to pay duties. He came in through the airport, he brought both of his laptops thinking, okay, I'm going to pay duty. And he actually declared them. And he said, here's my used laptop. It's only worth $200. I want to pay duties on it. And they were like, no, you're going to pay duties on your brand new laptop. And that's where he was doing the video that he warned not to bring that in. So that's an instance where there's two laptops. And a lot of people that are digital nomads have the same problem. They're bringing in two laptops and they say, guess what? You have to pay duty on one of them. unless that laptop's worth less than $500. But that's the $500 we're talking about. And that amount goes up at Christmas time on the land borders. I believe it goes up to $600 on the land borders. But that's at Christmas time. After Thanksgiving, I think it's in November, September. I have to look up this exact date. Good to know that we need recent official copies. Yeah, and you know what? Flying SGP, we didn't know. Actually, our marriage, I mean, we have several copies of our marriage certificate. We have, actually, my wife had to get her birth certificate too for several things. And they were like, oh, no, it's only good for a year. For some reason, even though it's like notarized and official and everything else from the actual notary where it's registered, for some reason, it's only good for, I don't know if it's for all documents, but I do know for a birth certificate and a marriage certificate, it only lasts. I would just get the most recent copy. Now, here's the other thing too. INM may accept an old one, but more than likely, if it's the government, they're gonna require a recent one. If they're that picky about names, they're gonna be that picky about the legal document being valid. Do you know many people who have had success extending their tip and getting their deposit back? I hear most people lose it. Actually, to be honest with you, Laura, from what I understand, most people do lose that deposit. The surefire way, like I said, is being able to get your residency taken care of before. Here's the thing, like for example, when I converted to permanent, when I was renewing, Monterrey had a problem, and when I actually did my first residency, they had a problem. It took me 8 months to get my card. And then the second time I applied, and it took about a month before, I mean, there was a lot, but we had a problem here in Monterrey with a lot of the South Americans and stuff because I did my residency process here. And before we moved to San Miguel, and then when I converted over to permanent, I actually, it took me, no, actually, was able to get renewed before my temporary expired. Now, I went to permanent, I wouldn't be able to get a tip. But your best bet is if you can get your residency taken care of before your tip expires and you don't need an extension, cancel your tip. You go and you cancel it, and then you get another one. So basically, let's say your residency expires on the 15th, you're going to get a tip to the 15th. If you can take care of your residency by the 10th, or even if you can take care of it by the 14th, on the 45th day or the 44th day, and get to customs and say, I want to cancel this tip, get my deposit back, and then I'm going to apply for another tip based on my new residency card. And you don't have to extend. That's your best bet. We will be in the PV area. You know what? I don't know what the backlog is in the PV area. No, actually, you can do that, I believe, at the airport, if I'm not mistaken. And you know what? I always talk about getting facilitators that'll do that. I know that Sonia Diaz has a group that does renewals and facilitates immigration processes, but they also do a lot of other stuff. I don't know if they do take care of tips, but they may be able to do that for you and help you out with that. But usually I know in San Miguel, you would go to the Querétaro airport where they had a Banjercito and a SAT office, and that's where you would get your tip done. I would imagine there's a lot of foreigners in Puerto Vallarta, so it should be at the airport. What you do is ask, especially if you're going to make your appointments or whoever through one of the Puerto Vallarta groups, ask. There's another guy that does Pat's Plates, that deals with vehicles all the time and driver's licenses. He does facilitating. He might be able to do something like that. I don't know if he does tips, but you know, that might be something that you might. I believe he has a Facebook group called Pat's Plates and Driver's Licenses. He's an expat that offers that. But I haven't had very many, because the problem with your tip, let me explain to you, Laura, is even if you extend the tip, you're extending your permission, but technically your tip, you're just really extending the time your vehicle can have permission to be there. Your tip technically expires, so the system basically says, so let's say you don't get your immigration process done till the following month, like January 15th. I'm using January 15th. I don't know why, but let's say your process, you can't get an appointment till February, but you got your appointment before January 15th, so you're good, and you have to extend your tip to February for another 30 days because you got to. Really what happens is in the system, technically you lose your deposit because that's when the tip is canceled. But you got an extension, which is a totally different kind of thing. I don't know how to explain it. The government is kind of weird sometimes when it comes to those kinds of things. Any other questions? Well, I guess we're at an hour here. We had a pretty good group here. I don't have anything else. If anybody else has anything else, if you could, if you want to. Okay, I got a good question here before, and I'm glad I didn't sign off. Rastaman says, is there still no financial check when converting temporary residence to residente temporal to residente permanente? If so, is it fairly safe to say that you'll still be the case in the spring? You're not going to have an issue with the... now, here's the thing, Rastaman. I don't know why, but I have heard some INM offices are saying, bring your financials with you. To renew your residency, even your temporary residency. But I have not heard of one single person that has been denied. I think it's just a formality. And you can convert after 4 years of residence temporal to residente permanente with no financial solvency requirements. It's not going to change. I don't foresee it changing by the spring of 2025. That's been the way it's been, and I don't see any changes in the immigration law anytime soon. They've been even very slow at changing the financial requirements to begin with. You're not going to have any issues. As a matter of fact, if anything, they've gotten a little bit, like I said, immigration in Mexico, here in Mexico, uses the UMA formula. So the financial requirements are actually lower than the consulate. And it's ironic, because technically you qualify here in Mexico. Certain people actually qualify with Mexico INM, but they don't qualify at the consulate. But you got to get past the consulate to get to INM. It makes no sense. And I've been waiting 3 years for immigration to say, not immigration, but the consulates to say, but I've explained it many times that every consulate's its own kingdom. And it just all depends. Every consulate, they make up their own rules, and that's just the way the cookie crumbles. And so they haven't updated this wanting to use the minimum wage for some reason. And that's where when I tell people this rumor going around that you can just show that you're retired and get permanent residency and that it's up to the consulate's discretion. Well, it's kind of true. It's true with semantics, but it's not true in reality. There's no consulate anywhere, nowhere. I don't care if you explain to them the law, like JB says in his YouTube video. Nowhere are you going to find a consulate that's just going to say, okay, you're retired, we'll just give you a visa. Although they do have the authority to do that. And some of these people that claim that they got this information from a lawyer, Well, the lawyer's telling them the truth. Yeah, technically the consulate can give you, and actually Jose Arteaga's lawyer is correct. The consulate can give you a visa based on nothing. They can approve you based on no financial requirements. Technically. Will they do that? Realistically, no. They have their requirements and they're not going to budge from them. And they will budge from them sometimes. And this is proof that they can budge from them. There's been people, I'm $100 short. I'm $200 short a month. I'm $500 short a month. Not a problem. We'll approve you. Hey, there's one of the requirements by law is that you have to be retired. There's some people that have come in, shown their financial, then went straight to permanent without having to meet the retirement age or show a retirement letter at all, just because. I don't know. There were entrepreneurs that came in and they let them in on permanent. So is it possible? Yes. But normally when they do those kinds of approvals, it's because they're $100 short, $50 short, or you meet the financial requirement or far exceed the financial requirements, and they just give you the. And Lisa, real quick, I have a question about the marriage license. My marriage license has a different name. It does not match my name now. I was married before, so it has my old name. Will that be a problem? That's actually going to be an issue. Actually, I'll give you an example, Lisa. There are ways to overcome that. What I would do is I would get with a facilitator. It's going to be a little bit more of a step to prove that the person on your marriage license is the same person from your original name. Okay. So, and you might have to go to the Social Security Administration, whatever, when you changed your name, show your name changes and all of that stuff. The one that can help you with that is going to be your facilitator. You're going to have issues. I'll tell you right off the bat. I'll give you an example. We were purchasing our house in San Miguel de Allende. An individual was there at the notario. They were trying to settle a will. And in the will, their father had given them his house. And she had gotten married since the father had done his will. This is another very important thing. If you're ever going to live here in Mexico, you're going to, do a will or anything, make sure all the name. If your daughter, your son gets married, or your daughter gets married and changes their name, or your son changes their name, you make sure you do a new will. And the thing that you need to do is make sure that the names match. What happened is this individual was married, so when they said, okay, give me your passport so we can start the process, they said, sorry, we can't start the process. And she's like, what do you mean? I'm the same person in the will. Here's the will. And she even had some paperwork that proved that she was married. And she said, no, your name on your passport doesn't match the name that's on your father's will. And they were like, what do we do? The notario said, go get a lawyer. And so they probably ended up in a very, very long process in trying to settle that out and get there where they could have. And the father didn't know any better or whatever, or she got married since they made and she says, yeah, but I got married. And they said, we don't care. Mexico doesn't care. That's what the notario told her. You have to make sure your names match. Okay, gringos are us. It makes no difference in Mexico if the marriage certificate isn't apostolized. The consulate could have issues if the names don't match. Yes. That's and I didn't have an apostolized marriage certificate. Now, I have heard of immigration offices requiring it to be apostolized, but I think that's more of a I'm in charge and I'm telling you what to do type of thing than it is a normal process. And Gringo Zara says, take as much validating as you can to gather support why the names don't match. And that's one of the things that you're going to have to do. But that's why I suggest, Lisa, that you get a facilitator or an attorney that can help you with this process, because they'll know exactly what paperwork you need to prove that. For example, okay, they'll tell you, go to the Social Security Administration, show where you did your, I mean, because here's the deal. When you change your name, Lisa, you have to change it with social. That's how you change it legally is with of course, you take your marriage certificate, you change it with the Social Security Administration. And actually, I know this because we used to do this with background investigations all the time. We used to have to go to the Social Security Administration and say, okay, this person, can you, you need to go to the Social Security. And actually, we would have a form that we could go to, or we would have them supply us with the proof when we would do the background investigations when we were for people that were new employees. And they would have to show proof that they changed their name. And why does their name on their birth certificate not match? And they had to say, well, I got married, and it would come with their birth certificate, not a birth certificate, marriage certificate. And then the biggest thing was the Social Security Administration change. So I don't know what kind of paperwork. We used to get certain paperwork with the Social Security Administration that show that. I don't know if that's accepted here in Mexico, but a facilitator can get you all of that stuff. What you need to show the name, why the names don't match. And you might need to have certain documents like your birth certificate and then your name on your pass. But they're going to go by the name on your passport to begin with, to start off. And then one DKTRE. Hello, other than obvious expat towns and cities, could you suggest some places to check out that have a temperature climate that still have affordable real estate? Actually, there's a lot of places. San Luis is very, very popular. The other place is very popular, but you have to be very willing to immerse yourself in the Mexican culture. And is Morelia. Morelia is a very beautiful place. I know two individuals, well, a couple and another individual that live in Morelia, and they love it there. It's in the central part of Mexico. The weather's great. The climate is great. San Luis, the climate is great also. And San Luis there's an expat community there, but it's not really big. But those are two places that I would suggest that I know expats move to. And actually in Morelia, there's a small community of expats. They even have a group, and they talk amongst each other, but most of them are people that they don't want to be around other expats or Americans or Canadians or whatever. They would rather be with the local culture. And but they keep in touch because they help each other out and everything else still. Greetings from Ernie from Medellin. What is your take on San Cristobal de las Casas? I think the climate would suit me, but not for certain. Spring-like weather would be ideal. You know what? I'm not actually very familiar with San Cristobal de las Casas. I'm not really familiar with it. If you want spring-like weather, the ones that I'm real familiar with, actually, we always call it San Diego weather year-round, except for this year. They did have a, I want to say we, but I was not there. They did have a very Querétaro, San Miguel de Allende, any place in the central part of Mexico is going to be very, very good weather. And it's going to be kind of spring-like all year round. You do get some cold, but it's kind of like that San Diego weather where it doesn't get too hot during the day. As a matter of fact, in San Miguel, I don't have air conditioning or heat because during the day it gets warm, and at night we just get underneath the covers. It gets cold. It gets down into the 30s or 40s. And if you leave the windows open during the day when it gets hot, sorry about that. During the day when it gets hot, we just basically we've already the interior of the house maintains the cold weather. Actually, it's colder inside than it is outside. Kind of a built-in air conditioner. But I've heard that San Cristobal is very, De Las Casas is very, very, very beautiful place. I'm not too familiar with it to give you any. I've never been there neither, and I'd hate to give you advice to say, "Oh, it's beautiful." Just what I've heard, it's just a beautiful place. Um, but if you want something with spring-like weather, central Mexico, Oaxaca also is very. The only thing with Oaxaca is it's a little bit closer to the Pacific side, but you're going to get the hilly country, for example, Mexico City too has got decent weather. Any that central area is dry, and it's also like I said, it's San Diego all year round. Any other thing? Any other questions? We've already gone into 1 hour and 19, and I don't know why my little background wants to keep moving here, but well, thank you guys. And Gringos R Us, they're going to be in San Cristobal de las Casas next year and are looking forward to it. Puerto Escondido. Yes. Actually, we went to Oaxaca, if you like to surf. Yeah, we went to Zipolite and Puerto Escondido when we went over there to Oaxaca. And so thanks a million for everything. Like always, thanks for your support. I'm going to try to I'm going to try to ramp it up on the videos. I apologize for the house video because I still have some cleaning up to do, and I had footage everywhere since it took a whole year, and I'm trying to get all the footage together. I still need to take one last drone, and I'm going to cut it into 2 parts. And I also am going to do the only part. There's a couple of unfinished parts here, but the last filming that I need to do here inside the house for the final tour is going to be the studio, because I have a lot of electronic equipment lying around, and I want to make it at least presentable. Good evening, Wilfredo. We're just about to sign off. I'm great to see you there. Thanks, guys, for everything. As always, it's really great to see. I have a small group that always comes on live with me, and it's a quality group. That's what we aim for here at Retired Life in Mexico. It's quality, not quantity. The same thing with our Facebook group. It's quality. It's about us helping each other out. It's not about anybody being the expert. It's about everybody helping each other out. And I thank you. I thank everybody. Because, like I said, my channel focuses on quality, not making money, not trying to convince you that Mexico is the best thing in the world, even though I think it's the best thing in the world. I want you guys to be able to move. And like I said, there's a statistic that 50% of Americans go back home. And I'm almost positive that in my viewership, you're not going to be part of the 50% that goes back home, because you're going to be informed. You're going to know what it's like, and you're going to be able to overcome the obstacles that it takes to live in a foreign country. And I'm not talking about Mexico. To move anywhere, even if you move across the United States to a place that's a different culture, it's a major move. And I want you to be the 50% that stays here. Not the 50% that goes home because you're frustrated. Not the 50% that goes home because you were told a different story. Or not the 50% that because you believe some YouTuber or somebody on Facebook or whatever. I want you to be the 50% that stays because you're well informed and you know how it works and you're well able to work around the system, and and I'll tell you what, me personally, this has been the best adventure I've ever had in my life, in my whole life. And I can tell you, I had a wonderful job. I had an exciting job. I went all over the world with my job. I went to the Middle East. I went everywhere. But nothing can compare to my retirement in Mexico. And I'll leave you with that. So, as I always finish with my videos, well, my new thing that I always finish with my videos, I'm going to finish with my lie. As always, stay safe and stay informed.